Greetings. Today is January 3rd, 2017. Happy New Year to all of you in the future, I suppose. This is my first recording since the new year has started. And we're about a little less than, I think, 17 days till, or a little, about, 17 days till Donald Trump is inaugurated. And I think from that day forward, we're going to see a lot of interesting things happen. I'm not really sure. I do believe that there will be the whole Pizzagate scandal will be exposed. Right now, the right people behind that in the law enforcement agencies are waiting their time to expose this and wait till Barack Obama has no more executive power. And I think a lot of things are going to bring a lot of people down, and rightfully so. This is a disgusting, and I believe it to be true, ring that pedophile ring that exists in Washington. It doesn't surprise me anymore, and it shouldn't surprise any of you anymore. You have to understand that in the last 2 years of my life, as I was kind of going through a spiritual awakenness, I've always contemplated the idea of power and what it can do to people, but not just to people, to me in particular. I saw myself kind of metamorphosizing and changing with the idea of having a lot of money. I could kind of see myself kind of losing it. And power does strange things to many people if they don't know how to harness it. And I'm not saying that I know how to, but I can acknowledge that power can corrupt a lot of people, and to the point of doing something very sadistic and evil. And so it doesn't surprise me that it happens in Washington, where a lot of people, politicians, and those who are very rich, and it's not because they're rich that makes them evil. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you have the ability to do something and can do something, us as human beings may not have the ability to restrain ourselves. So, I mean, this is a lesson for everybody that power can corrupt the best of the people. And so something to think about for yourself. Now, I do believe that this will be exposed in 2017, and and it has nothing to do with anybody that I know in Washington. Again, if you go back to my other recordings, I talked about 2017 is going to be a year of chaos, and there's going to be many elements to that chaos. But this one whole pedophile scandal is going to be a part of that. Now, the main reason why I'm recording this message to you all is on two separate things. The first one, I looked on the news and I saw that there were like 250 earthquakes in the last day or so or around the 1st of January, that hit the border of kind of California and Mexico. I think it was in an area called Brawley, which is a border town basically, and or kind of a border town. It's not too far from the border. Again, this is what I'm seeing and observing, that this was on the news, and I had said, I think last month about, or in November, I can't remember, that I believe that there was going to be a major earthquake that separated both the United States and Mexico. And why did I say that? Again, I based on the premise that Donald Trump is the Lord's anointed one, the one that's going to be needed when the time of chaos does happen. And because he said it, it kind of has to happen now. But that's not just the reason. There's other things too. I believe that the Mexican government has betrayed its own people, has betrayed the covenant with our Lord when he or the government body for many decades have allowed their people to flee their land because one, their unwillingness to try to do anything for their people. And that's not what the Holy Family is. And you have to understand, again, the matriarch of Mexico is Our Lady of Guadalupe, and behind that's the Holy Family. And so when you allow your children to leave because you desire not to do anything, and you have an unwillingness to want to do anything because it's saving you money, then you have betrayed your people and you have betrayed that covenant with our Lord. So that's the second main reason, besides Donald Trump saying it, and therefore it has to be true because he's God's anointed one. The third one, the really one that caught my eye, was the statue of Our Lady, um, Tears of Blood, in another town of Mexico, I think in December. And I said the town's name in the other recording. I don't have it on the top of my head. And that made me really think, that she knows something that's going to have to happen. I have to be honest with you about something. I was watching some other videos from people who are trying to make prophecies about the end times. And he seemed like a very good gentleman. I don't know. But the way he came across was really, he was pointing to some kind of disaster. He was an American, but he was pointing to some other disaster that would happen elsewhere in the world. And the way he said it was very insensitive in a way. Like nothing could happen in his part of the world. Like whatever does happen in the end of times is somehow going to not happen to that person or to that preacher. So I thought it was a little arrogant from him because he didn't seem to be too concerned about this disaster that was going to happen in another part of the world. Although he had some scientific reasons for that, it still showed somewhat of an arrogance that nothing bad could happen under the land that he lives in the United States of America. And, when this chaos happens, it's going to happen to us all. When Our Lady allows for these miracles to happen, these mysteries to take place, everyone's going to feel it. Nobody in this earth can be able to hide from it. We're all going to feel it. And we're all going to know it came from God. You see, it's common human arrogance for Christian so-called preachers and prophets to speak as if they talk to the Lord or anything like that. I have told you many times, I'm not a prophet. I'm not somebody who says who's seen God. I'm not someone that said that God talked to me in any way. Again, I'm just connecting dots. I'm making observations, and I'm saying them. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm recording them. For whatever importance it serves in the future, I don't know. But when I talk about this earthquake in Mexico, in the U.S. border, and I had believed that it would create this natural wall, what that implies is that there's going to be a lot of people who die from that. And that made sense to me when the Blessed Mother, the statue of the Blessed Mother was crying in blood. That I think she knows what's going to have to happen. But you have to understand, it's not something that I should be happy to say or proud to say or happy to predict. I'm sure that person who I was listening to would be up in joy, if his prediction came true, and that's just the arrogance of him. As good as he may think he is, temptation seeps in the smallest crack possible, and so when I think about this is not something that I want to be happy about. It's not something that you're conflicted when you have to make these kind of predictions, because it implies that a lot of people in the millions, maybe, I don't know, may die. Again, I'm just making an observation and connecting the dots, and I don't know if it'll happen. I should hope that it wouldn't happen, but it's not up to me, really. I realize that. It's not whether if my prediction comes true. I have nothing to do with it. It's his will, I believe. So unfortunately, you know, I have to realize too that I too may die at any moment from whatever chaos that does happen. I hope that's not the case, because I feel like it's my duty to write about the sign of the times that we live in, you know. But truthfully to you all, I really don't know what's going to happen. Again, these are just observations I made, and I'm not a prophet, so by any conventional definition, I guess, of a prophet, I just open my eyes and listen. So that was the one thing I want to talk about. It was just kind of odd that I saw this story and it said along the U.S.-Mexico border. And of course, what else am I supposed to think about after I had said that kind of weird prediction in December? But it's there in the news, so I felt that I had to record this. The other thing I wanted to talk about too is that about Donald Trump, and he is supposedly bringing a lot of people on his cabinet and staff that are billionaires, and maybe some would refer to as insiders, people part of the establishment. And I thought about this for a second. These kind of comments are coming from pundits and political pundits. And I don't want to write them off or anything like that. They made a valid observation. And, maybe to some people that Trump had picked have no experience in that field. But what I want to tell you in the future is that you got to think about what we had before that. We had people so-called who had experience, and but they knew how to play the game, and they knew how to maybe cheat the American people, nickel and diming them. So the whole idea that you have that people with experience doesn't really hold water, because we've had so-called people with experience for the last, 30, 40 years, So that doesn't really hold water on its own. But there's something more that's important in Washington, and I want you to understand this in the future, because the pundits, the commentators, they don't really understand the thing that's brewing in Washington. Going back to this whole pedophile ring that I believe will be exposed shortly after Donald Trump is inaugurated, you have to understand why did something like that go on for as long as it did. How was it allowed to go on for as long as it has? And I think it's been going on for a very long time. I mean, there's stories that are coming about the, in Nebraska, I think they call it the Lincoln Coverup. It was some kind of financial institution cover-up, but it basically had a pedophile ringmaster by the name of Lawrence King. And those are, it wasn't a big story back then, because they did, whoever controlled the media wanted it smeared out of the public eye, and they did a good job of it. And then Hollywood has its own pedophile ring in the past, and you don't hear much about it, right? So you have to ask yourself, why was something allowed? Why was something so corrupt and evil that allowed to go on in Washington, right? It says a lot and it speaks volumes about the nature of Washington and the people who have a lot of money and power and what they're willing to do to protect themselves and to cover up and to continue to do their evil. And this does not happen in the United States. It was happening in Britain. But, you know, there was a kind of a celebrity, I think his name was David Savile, who it was after his death that they realized that he was molesting children and possibly killing them too. And how does this? And he was good friends with the royal family, right? So how does this allow to go on? So that's the nature of Washington. So and these are people with the so-called experience. But there's something if Donald Trump, I think, realizes that the filth that is in Washington, right? He realizes the filth that is in Washington. And so to uproot Washington, if you're really going to make fundamental changes and you're going to do some things that the establishment does not like because it sees that somebody is going to rain on their parade, is going to expose them, they're going to resist naturally, right? So who can you trust? So if you look back at John F. Kennedy, some people will have these theories of why he was killed, but he was going after the mob, basically, or through his brother. But that's not the point. The point was, who did John F. Kennedy trust the most? It was Robert F. Kennedy, his brother, right? But around the Kennedys, he didn't have that kind of coalition of people he could trust because you didn't know if you could trust the FBI, you didn't know you could trust this person. People, it only seemed like there was just the two Kennedy brothers that could be relied upon. And that's scary. That's scary if you can't trust your vice president. That's scary if you can't trust your FBI director. So if you're really going to make changes, you have to surround with people you can trust first and foremost, because that is the most important thing. It's not experience right now. To make the changes that he has to surround himself with people he can trust. And to me, it makes sense that these are billionaires. Okay? Yeah, one might be the CEO of Exxon, but if it's someone he trusts, and most importantly, that person he trusts is surrounded with other people that he does trust, okay, that he has his own kind of security detail, his own little network, that will protect him a little bit better than somebody like Jill Stein, who's assigned to be, some kind of Secretary of Commerce or something, right? And she's not going to be able to push people around. She doesn't have the connections. She doesn't have the network that can help shield her from the Washington insiders who would seek to her demise, who would interfere with what she's trying to do. So he's got, Donald Trump is basically a bully. And we give a bully a bad name, but sometimes you need a thug to take on other thugs, because that's what it takes. A Jill Stein or Bernie Sanders wouldn't be able to take on these other thugs in Washington. And it's thugs who run Washington. And it's going to take a thug to take out another thug. But we want a thug that's on our side, that's going to stand up for the people. But he has to, in reality, he has to surround himself with other thugs too, who have a lot of connections, okay? Because in order to uproot Washington, there's going to be a lot of resistance, a lot of people who know the game and understand the game very well, okay? And people who are not well hooked up or well connected are not going to be able to shield themselves from the type of interference that these Washington insiders and different agencies are going to try to do. So I want you to understand that in the future, because the media nobody else seems to understand that. You know, even the pundits, I think, missed that. Right? In fact, I believe they all have missed that, and they're making predictions based on conventional wisdom that everybody plays by the rules. Okay, but you have to realize that people at the top, the rules are for the masses. They're not for them. Okay, so those are the kind of people we're dealing with that we want to uproot from Washington. Okay, so we have to bring in other thugs to take care of them, and with the hope that the puppet master, of course, Donald Trump, will be able to rein them in, and then make changes later on. But first, he has to surround with people that he trusts. If you really think about it realistically, go back to the Kennedys, and when you watch documentaries about them and about Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy in the relationship, and how you know the older brother trusted the younger brother to do a lot of things, but that was just one man, you know. And I really believe that the Kennedys were paranoid of the people that are around them. And you can only do so much when you only trust one person. So you have to put trust in a lot of other people. And so it makes sense to me that Donald Trump, he knows these people probably already, and he trusts them probably. And that's more important right now than experience. So the whole idea that some of these people are billionaires, that doesn't bother me. And the reason is that if I were to pick Joe Schmo from the street, who's poor, and put him in charge, what connections does he have compared to the connections that a billionaire has, right? So, I mean, it makes sense that you pick somebody rich because he has his own little security network, his own little security detail, his own people he trusts. That's going to make it harder for the Washington insiders to interfere. So I want you to understand that in the future. Again, my observation. I could always be wrong, but I think it makes sense in the context of what we're dealing with, the nature of the enemy that we're dealing with. And so for you in the future, that's all I have for now. Today is January 3rd, 2017. Signing off.